Awesome, thank you. So, you guys already know me. You know what I do. So, this presentation is way less about work and way more about stuff I do in my spare time, which is ITDRC. So, this is kind of an overview. This is a cool picture I got to take a couple weeks ago doing some stuff I'm going to talk about later. But ITDRC is the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. And they are a 501c3 that got started back in 2008 out of Texas as kind of the response to a growing need for technology in more places. They focus on specifically bringing new solutions to disaster areas. Basically, anytime you've seen a big disaster on the news recently, well, a big natural disaster on the news recently, ITDRC has rolled some form of support out to that disaster. They're part of the, Danny, what's up?
So do they deal with like infrastructure security and like assurance? Or?
No. So they focus on rawly providing that first 24 hours through first couple weeks of IT after a disaster strikes. So as we'll get into in a bit, one of the things they do is they rolled a ton of trucks down to Louisiana after Hurricane Ida came through last month. Yeah. We rolled out a big truck that's a FEMA level, I can't remember which level command center it is, but if any of you were here when the IBM Cybertruck came through, roughly a similar size truck just filled with equipment to help respond to a disaster and set up a mobile command post for anybody that's responding. So, like I mentioned, ITDRC is part of the National VOAD, and that means it's one of the groups that FEMA has selected to be a part of this group, and VOAD stands for Volunteer Organizations Active During Disaster. So it's made up of entirely volunteers that get to respond, not as the first responders, but as the people who support them and everybody who's actually going through it. So one of their mission statements is focused on deploying IT solutions to communities in need after disaster. And this is one of the trucks that they will roll out. We've got a huge fleet with a variety of equipment. So some of the stuff that they're doing right now is they've got people and assets deployed for Hurricane Ida. They have people deployed all over the US for the Afghan resettlement, and that's one of the things that I got to do, which I'll get into in a bit. They also have stuff set up for some of the wildfires out west in California, Oregon, and Washington. And while most of the time they operate inside of the US, they also have some people that have traveled out to Haiti and to Barbados to set up response networks after they've been struck by earthquakes and other natural disasters. COVID changed things a little bit for them because, well, we stopped being able to travel to a lot of places, but also there was a huge need for people to get back online after schools, libraries, coffee shops, all of that closed back in last March and a little bit onwards. One of the things they're doing now is supporting the vaccine sites, but they also started an initiative called Project Connect, which I can also get into. So this is a map of the public deployments that ITDRC has across the US and down a little bit outside of the US. You can see there's a gap in New York. And that's because, one, we don't have a ton of volunteers up here, but two, we don't have the contacts. And we're going to bump into that again. But most of these sites, any of the green pins you see, are places that ITDRC has actively dropped people and equipment into fixing some sort of problem that an area has. And all of the red ones are places where we've had stuff in the past and have pulled it out either because the response was done or because a new solution was put into place or something like that. So I pulled this yesterday, and most of these green ones you see are now permanent sites with Project Connect. I mixed up my slide order. Anyway, the litmus test for ITDRC deploying stuff is, does it benefit the whole community? That's their bottom line. Because if it's something that will actually help people out, they want to get as many people and as many resources there to solve that problem as they can. Part of that is prioritizing things. So ITDRC has 3 priorities. The first is providing for emergency response and life-critical systems. The second is providing to the first responders outside of that and mass care facilities. So anywhere that's feeding, housing, giving aid to people that are inside of that disaster, let's say. And then lastly, helping the community respond. Things like charging stations and Wi-Fi hotspots. So some quick stats about ITDRC in 2020. They had 29 different relief operations, 817 new sites established, 471 communities served, 184 carryover sites, so these were ones that were established in or before 2019 and were still active, which brings them to a total of 1,001 sites that were actually managed. So that's 1,001 places that they had stuff to manage, be it people or assets. With this, you need a lot of volunteers, and there were 616 that were active last year. And that number has only gone up as we've added more sites and more, as more volunteers have joined. There were 2,285 ones that were active last year for a total of 39,838 hours, which brought in a value for the communities of $1.59 million. One of the cool things that ITDRC does is they partner with a ton of different companies. This isn't an exhaustive list by any means. I just pulled a snapshot from the website. But all of these companies provide stuff to ITDRC to help out in their response. From this list, I've worked with T-Mobile, Ruckus, and Cisco Meraki on actually dropping stuff in places and using that equipment to help serve some sort of mission. And that's been in the last 8 months. So like I mentioned earlier, with the COVID pandemic, everybody had to go home, and there are some places where people didn't have readily available Wi-Fi or reliable internet connections or anything like that. And nowadays, you could probably go to a library or to a coffee shop or something like that, except when they're all closed because there's a pandemic on and you're not allowed to go inside. So ITDRC came up with a solution, and that was Project Connect, a goal to serve underserved communities and set up wireless access and potentially charging stations for people who needed to get their devices online. This involved setting up contacts across the US and sending out wireless devices and networking infrastructure to places like libraries, community centers, firehouses in some places, anywhere that the community could congregate in a safe way during the pandemic and get online. This lets students get to Zoom classes, let them get online to take exams, all that stuff. And I don't have the total of the number of sites that were deployed, but most of those points on that map were as the result of Project Connect and COVID-19. So where do I come in? I joined back in February, and I've deployed twice so far. The first was with the Finger Lakes OpX that we did, and the second was with the Fort Dix Afghan Wi-Fi project. I've also been a little bit involved in the Knox-Lock project that we have, but I'm going to get into all 3. So over the summer, I got to go down to Ithaca, New York, and shoot Wi-Fi across the gorge. How many of you have been to Gannett? All right, a couple of you. So this is at the Visitor Center. We talked to the park ahead of time, and we're like, hey, we're trying to come in and just do a training exercise, get familiar with the team, get familiar with the equipment, et cetera. So what we did was we planned it out so that we had some equipment that was sitting up in the parking lot, and we shot with the Unify Light Beam all the way out over here across the gorge and set up a video link all the way across. With that, we did a number of things, but we rolled out 2 Pelican cases full of gear. And in that, we had some tripods, some, I'm trying to remember what specifically we deployed. But it was Meraki gear, Ubiquiti gear, Jackeries for power, and then a Meraki cellular hotspot. So what we did was inside of this car, we had dropped a Meraki MG21 hooked up to T-Mobile's network. From there, piped that into a Meraki MX something or other. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. And from there, set up a point-to-point Wi-Fi network. So we launched from that car over to this relay tower, and that white vertical box is a point-to-point router. So we had Wi-Fi going across the parking lot, and then the dish on the back of that is a Unify light beam, which shot all the way across the gorge to the target point, where we kind of coordinated back and forth to actually aim them, because we were, I can't remember the exact distance. I thought it showed it on here.
So 378 meters.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, almost a quarter mile away. And we got live video transmitted back and forth across the gorge. And the link had a capacity of about 150 megs, and this was before we got the aiming completely tuned in. But this was a lot of fun, and it was just kind of a good training exercise. That tied into the second one that I got to do, which was the Afghan resettlement. So over the past few months, the US has been pulling a ton of people out of Afghanistan. And with that, the refugees hopped through several bases in Europe, first one in the Middle East, then to Ramstein, Germany. And from there, they flew across the US. There were some people that landed in Fort Dix, some people that landed up in Minnesota, some people that landed down near Virginia. And they've been getting all spread out. So one of the things that happened was there weren't good places to put all of the Afghan refugees when they came over and landed. They had some housing, but a lot of it got put up in big, huge tents, which you're going to see in a sec. So there were 10 of these tents set up with cots inside and beds and a little bit of storage just for people to stay in. And that's pretty much all there was. A little bit of power just running along the sides, but there wasn't internet, and this is out in the middle of nowhere at Fort Dix. So there's not good cell coverage, and even if there was, most of the Afghans coming over didn't have cell plans that would have worked in the US if they had cell plans at all. So with that, we were asked as one of the organizations to come in and provide wireless coverage for the refugees to get online, get immigration paperwork done, a whole bunch of other things. So ITDRC was called by one of the other VOEDs, or one of the other NGOs, non-governmental organizations that was on site to come in and set up some wireless networks. And what we did was we rolled out with 3 pieces of gear, well, 3 types of gear multiplied out over several different sets. We had a wireless router, a Meraki MX, and then a Meraki MG. So that's a cellular hotspot. And those cellular gateways acted as the backbone to this network. We plugged everything in, plugged it into a kit, and figured out, all right, this is going to work in this environment. It's going to be able to serve a ton of people. The next solution was just figuring out how to deploy it because, well, this is kind of the area we were deploying things into. Wasn't much in ways of a good way to protect anything. There wasn't a good way to shelter it from the rain. So what we ended up doing is we went to Home Depot, grabbed a box and a chain and lock just to keep it tied to the box. That way it wouldn't blow over and run away. Punched a hole in the bottom of it to get an extension cord through and wired everything up. We did this 6 different times to cover all of those tents. And by the end of the day, we had set up Wi-Fi for over 2,000 people off of 6 APs. Wasn't great Wi-Fi, but the goal was to get a minimal amount of coverage there. That way people could have some way to get online and talk to their families. After 24 hours, actually after a week or 2, I can't remember how long it's been, there have been a couple terabytes that have gone out over these networking appliances. And this stuff all ties back to the Meraki cloud. So we have remote management of it so we don't have to go back on site and troubleshoot whenever something goes wrong. But in the end, we got to help out over 2,000 people and get them back some sort of connectedness back to the world. And I thought that was really cool. There was also one other thing I wanted to cover with these. So most of the deployments we did were near these tents, but the last one was over near a morale tent that was set up for some of the refugees to hang out on. There were some kids playing soccer nearby. There was some people that were trying to learn English. One of the other NGOs had people come in and teaching English to little tiny elementary school aged kids. And one of the kids was really curious as they saw us come over with a big red box and an extension cord dangling out the bottom. And they said, "What are you doing?" in some broken English. And we went, "We're setting up Wi-Fi." And as soon as we said that, you could see the kids' eyes just light up because they were so excited to be able to finally get back online. And as soon as we had said that, you could hear ripples of conversation go, "Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi?" Kind of like the seagulls in Finding Nemo. And that was such an amazing feeling because, I mean, one, you're getting to help a ton of people out, but everybody knows Wi-Fi. And it was really cool to just see that cultural gap be bridged by something as simple as a box that you're putting down. So when you're deploying a ton of this stuff out into the field, eventually something's going to go wrong. We've had sites go offline. We've had stuff that just gets unplugged. We've had stuff that's no longer needed. And one of the things that we needed to do was figure out a way to monitor all of this and identify where issues are happening and how to get them back up. So ITDRC started their NOCSOC program, which is a way to do just that and hopefully keep these sites up long enough that they can serve their communities pretty well. It starts with an Elastic Stack, which is fed by syslog from the devices that we have, as well as some of the built-in logging features that the cloud dashboards have. So most of the stuff we deploy is either Cisco Meraki, Ubiquiti, or Ruckus, and all of those have dashboards with different features and different logging stuff. So that all gets fed back into Elastic, where it gets converted into nice, easy-to-parse log formats, and allows us to build a NOC queue via email and OS ticket, which is an open source service desk ticketing platform, which lets you alert and call out to the pool of people that we have set up as volunteers so that when something goes down, they can pull it back up and alert on it, and then hopefully reach out to the point of contacts we have at some of these sites and get something back online. So with that all in mind, ITDRC is a really cool organization, and one of the things that they always need is volunteers. If any of you are interested, you can go to volunteer.itdrc.org and sign up. Yes?
Is it worth it? Have you done it? I know, but I'm aware.
Yes and yes.
Okay.
Maybe 5 minutes earlier that question would have been okay, but now,
I know you volunteered. I was just gonna, like, is it worth it?
oh, it's absolutely worth it.
Okay.
I've had so much fun the 2 times I did it. When I went down to Fort Dix, it was absolutely last-minute planning. We got approval to be on base, I think, on Thursday. On Friday, I got approval to actually join up with this deployment. Friday night, I found a flight. ITDRC booked it for me. Saturday morning at 6 a.m., I was at the Rochester airport flying down to Philadelphia. Somebody picked me up, and we drove the hour east into New Jersey and started setting up Wi-Fi.
You have to pay for it?
I didn't pay for a thing. Enzo.
So, like, how does this sort of work with your job as well? Do you, like, time off, or do they?
Yeah, so a bunch of slides ago, there are some of those companies I mentioned partner with ITDRC. And if you're with one of those companies, a lot of them have volunteer programs. I know we have a ton of employees from Amazon and Google that work with their what I imagine is corporate outreach to some degree and their volunteer programs. And with those, if they have the time, they drop stuff and roll. If you don't have the time, like me, where I can't just drop everything on the dime or drop everything on a dime, then I've built a little bit of time into my schedule to be able to say, hey, I'm available these 2 weeks. If something comes up, I can fly out and go for it. If not, then I can support remotely with the knock-sock stuff. I can help out with some of the logistics, or I can be remote troubleshooting. Also, with the Fort Dix stuff, I was like, yeah, I don't have any plans this weekend. On Thursday. On Friday, I had a plane ticket. So it's pretty flexible. Yes?
What would you recommend to someone who has little experience in all the subjects? Should they still volunteer?
Absolutely. So the way I actually found out about ITDRC was on TikTok. For those of you that know She Networks, I mean, hey, don't knock it. It worked. But She Networks did a post about it, and I was like, oh, this is like a really cool organization. And I mean, I signed up with less than a year of experience in the real world. I mean, if you've gone through oh geez, I can't remember the name of the classes anymore. But routing and switching and like network services and sysadmin, or even a subset of those, you have more than enough experience to get started. If you have basic computer troubleshooting skills, you're absolutely good to go. Any of these things, if wireless or network engineering, project management, software development, ITDRC has needs everywhere. Even if you don't think you have the technical chops, you could come in as logistics. Somebody had to go and find that flight for me. Somebody had to book it. Somebody has to plan the deployments, figure out, hey, this is the stuff that we have on hand. This is the places that we can get in a reasonable amount of time. We have people that need to work with the community contacts. So there's a ton of stuff that you can do. Did that sufficiently answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. So, yes, Danny.
Hello, hi, another question. I don't know if you covered this, but are there like international, do they go international or just national?
Most of it is just national. There's been limited international deployments down to Haiti and to the Bahamas. I think we might have gone some other places, but I can't quite remember because, like I said, most of it is contained. Yes?
Where was this deployment at?
The one where I have the picture of the tank is in front of the tents at Fort Dix. But the other one was down to Ithaca in the Finger Lakes. But there are also simultaneous deployments for the Fort Dix op because while we were one team that was working at one site, there were also teams going to Virginia to set up down there, and then there were also teams going out to Fort McCoy, maybe, out in the northern US to set up there. So there were a ton of people that went out over the course of a 2.5-week span to set up just Wi-Fi for the Afghans. Yes?
So you mentioned in the beginning that there are 501 nonprofits, right? So do they tie in with like government relief efforts at all?
You're gonna have to define government relief efforts. What do you mean?
I don't know. Like you used the hurricane example before.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously, U.S. troops were like, ah yes, water, MRE, go. So like, do you guys partner with them at all to like provide
Yeah. So.
Sorry, that question's a little, but you got it.
It's good. Yeah, I can answer. So the way we get stuff done is by working with other contacts. And for Fort Dix and getting access to most of the other military bases, most people can't just walk onto a military base and go, hey, I want to set up Wi-Fi for some of the refugees you have here. That's just kind of not how that works. So we needed contacts on base. And one of the things that we did with Fort Dix was the colonel that we were working with to set up Wi-Fi for the Afghan refugees said, hey, we might also need some Wi-Fi for the SF troops that are coming here to help set up and help maintain and help serve these people. So we set up a morale Wi-Fi network for them too. And I think we have people going out next weekend to do that same thing and drop even more access points and even more connectivity. Initially, there was no backhaul other than the really, really bad cell signal that was out there. But since then, they've had some of the contractors come in and had Comcast come in and drop cables and access. And they're rolling out to go bring out more Wi-Fi that can now be serviced with all of that. Yes?
Another question for me, sorry. So, again, don't know if you covered this earlier, but what are the requirements for volunteering?
So, in order to be deployable, there are a couple requirements.
Sorry, deploy, not volunteer.
Well, volunteering, all you need to do is complete a background check and release and waiver and the code of conduct. It's very minimally invasive. It was like $7, and they looked to make sure, hey, you don't have any felonies and you're not an awful person. Not that having felonies immediately makes you an awful person, but it becomes a pain. If you have a security clearance, it's going to be really easy to get one. You have no issues there. But outside of that, you also have 3 courses that you need to complete. One is ITDRC 100, which is the ITDRC internal training, and that just kind of covers how ITDRC works, how you deploy, how you do this and that. The second one and the third one are IS 100 and IS 700. Those are some of the FEMA independent study courses that they offer to say, hey, you have some idea how incident command and how deploying into an emergency area will happen and how some of the command structures are in place work. That way you don't go in and cause more issues than you solve. All in all, going from signing up to being deployable, once you start the paperwork, it's a couple hours of classes that you can grind through in like a weekend, and then from there, you're ready to go. And then you get a nice shiny badge, and you get to say, hey, I get to go help people. So, are there any other questions? Cool. Yeah, so if you guys are looking to volunteer, volunteer.itdrc.org. You can go there, and there's a contact form that you can fill out and say, I'd like to help out. I don't know if you can specify what you'd want to do in there, but if not, after you're onboarded, you get to pick a lot of stuff.
I assume this is getting dropped in Discord.
I can drop it in Discord. Cool.
And the slides too, please.
Yes. I might have to drop a few things, but yeah. Cool. So thanks, everybody. Awesome to be back and presenting.